we were thinking about 1,000 per design. I actually almost threw up.
The average person who maybe goes to a couple events a year, if they go to any, they're not going to remember your name.
Who doesn't love being told, oh my god, I love your art? I live for that shit.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Creative Confessions, where we talk about all things Artist Alley, manufacturing products as an artist, and small business advice. I'm your host Macy, and I'm the artist and designer behind Mualcaina, a small business focused on kawaii designs. When first starting out, many small business owners often look to sell directly to customers. But if you want to scale your business, you're going to have to look into the wonderful world of wholesale, where you sell your products to businesses who will sell your products to customers. I'm excited to welcome our next guest, who is an illustrator and designer who works primarily with prints and stationery and has experience vending in person as well as working in wholesale. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Sarah, better known as Goyangii. So I'd love to start out if you could share a little bit about yourself and how you started Goyangii.
So yes, my name is Sarah, and I'm the artist and owner behind the brand Goyangii. Goyangii means cat in Korean, which leads me to say I draw a lot of cats. I got started, I would say around the tail end of 2019. However, prior to 2019, I was actually a product and service designer for all things retail. So think generally anything you might find at a Target store. Well, we're talking kids clothing, women's clothing, home goods, accessories, beauty and bath, activity sets. I was even a cat toy designer at some point. So that is how I have found myself making my own products to today.
Would you say that with your past experience and then going into your business, I'm assuming, did that really help you in terms of all of that?
You know, the funny thing is, I know how the corporate realm works in doing seasonal collections, when to produce things and doing technical files, but I've actually quite relinquished all of that after entering my own brand. Something about it gives me allergies. I didn't enjoy doing that at the time, so I'm actually not going to implement it, even though I know that it does work, but it doesn't align with me emotionally.
That's fair. And do you run your business right now full-time?
Completely full-time since 2021.
Wow, congrats. And as of now, are you doing everything yourself within your business, whether that's art, fulfillment, social media, and whatnot?
Yes, everything is on my own. If there is a hat for the role, I am wearing it. I am wearing the tallest hat on earth.
I bet. And we kind of brought up wholesale. For those unfamiliar, can you explain what wholesaling is?
Wholesale is basically selling your own products to another business at a discounted rate in bulk. So we're talking 10 to 20 quantities per product design, or like a sticker, for example. And that would be marked out at a steeper discount than what your average customer might see.
Do you offer wholesale directly to these businesses, or do you also use like a platform like Faire?
I do technically use both, but I only really advertise Faire. If you're not familiar with what Faire is a website where you can upload your own shop, much like Etsy, except the people who are browsing Faire are other retail businesses who have brick and mortars, online shops, and they get to see your private shop because they, as a retailer, need to be vetted as an actual retailer, so we don't have regular customers buying things at a steep discount.
Yeah, it's like they're buying it for their like corporate office party. It's like, oh, why are you getting everything at like 50% off?
To add on to that, the reason why I mainly only advertise Faire, even though there are quite a few big fees involved with handling your transactions on there, the very common payment terms that you might see, there's a term called net 30 and net 60. So net 30, net 60 essentially means the customer, your retailer who purchases your products, will pay you 30 to 60 days after receiving the product. That's very common with much larger businesses. We're thinking like department stores like TJ Maxx, Target, Barnes and Nobles. These days it's retailers buying in like the $100 range. Most of the times you can accept payment up front. But a lot of retailers do really enjoy the net 30 terms because it gives them wiggle room with what budget they're working with. Here's the thing, if you are collecting your orders directly, the issue of collecting payment can be kind of a hassle. Let's say you have 10 direct orders all at scattered dates, maybe like 2-3 days in between each other. Those 30 days start to add up. Not everyone pays on time, not due to malice, but just because life gets busy. You're running a small business, you forget things. You also, as a small business, are probably busy, and having to track down and chase down all of those payments, no thank you. So that's why I personally like to use Faire.
I'm not super familiar with wholesaling. I have had a few wholesale orders before, but I never really continued marketing that certain aspect of my business. But besides, I suppose you mentioned the wiggle room, what is the reason for them, I guess, for that being a common thing within wholesaling, the net 30, net 60, of being able to pay that much later, even after receiving the products?
I think it is a lot to do with the budgeting concerns. Again, this is more common with larger businesses. Also, it leaves time for businesses to audit the products that they receive and see if it's up to par with their own standards. Maybe they need to actually return the product or do an exchange. However, those net 30 terms are really generous if all that you're purchasing is like $100 worth of goods. Ideally, when you're working direct and the order minimum is quite low, like just getting the payment up front and figuring out issues later down the road is better. I personally have worked with like much larger corporations that unfortunately do the net 30, 60 terms, and that's kind of power in their hands because they are buying such large quantities. So you're kind of like, yeah, okay, I will forego the payment for like a whole month or even 2 months just to secure this opportunity.
How do you stay organized while managing wholesale alongside running your own business? Because I've always been curious about how do you maintain inventory, especially since from what I've seen on your social media, you tend to do a lot of wholesale alongside vending and managing your online business.
For starters, I will say the organization is a hot mess. Everything is just scattered on planners and like 50 billion notepads around my room. However, technology-wise, for inventory, there is an inventory management tool I use called Trunk, which really saves my booty. I'm doing events, I have my own online shop, and then I'm doing wholesale. So inventory is going out left and right, especially on weekends, and it is so hard to keep track of that. Nothing is more embarrassing when an established retail business such as Kinokuniya is like, hey, I need X number of these, X number of these. You go through the list and then you're like, actually, I don't have those quantities. I'm so sorry. Are you willing to be okay with this amount of the product? Or are you willing to wait a whole 2 weeks, a month? That conversation gives me nightmares. Although I'm gonna say all retailers are actually really friendly. A lot of times they are small businesses themselves and they get it. Like, things get messy and we're all just trying to like make things work. Don't be too scared if mistakes happen, but obviously you want to avoid them when you can. I invested in a tool called Trunk Inventory. I got that hot tip from Elda from Thousand Skies. Honestly, when I first got the subscription, I felt a little bit like I wasn't at that stage. It's $35 a month to sync up your inventories from a number of platforms. So for me, that would be Etsy, my Square, and my Faire. It also includes platforms like Shopify, probably like eBay and other things like that, Amazon. I am not good with updating my inventory after a show. People who are on top of that, you guys are superhuman. So initially I felt really awkward about getting this inventory tool, but it takes one task off of my hands. So
I used to use Trunk when I was very much on Etsy and I was syncing it with my Shopify, but I didn't even know you could sync it with Square. Like, I didn't even think to do that for events. That's crazy. Okay, I might have to get that again.
Before Trunk, my like Square checkout system for events was really straightforward. It just said sticker, postcard, print, pin, and everything, was the same price, and checkout was like 2 seconds. But because of the inventory management needs to like know each SKU of each product, I had to create a listing on Square for every single thing, which was a tough hurdle to cross, but very well worth it, because once you do that, you also get data from which design sells at each event.
In the beginning, I did the same thing where it's like, oh, a pin, here's the pin. But then when I realized after doing taxes, and it's like, you have to track like your inventory, I'm like, wow, I am effed right now with like keeping track of inventory and cogs and everything. So I need to do that as well with like the newer items, but I will have to look into trunk.
It's definitely an initial investment of time, but it's worth it in the end.
And for anyone who wants to go into the wholesale business, what are some basic requirements or preparations do you think they need to do?
If you're just starting out, I would highly recommend getting your wholesale prices down from the get-go. Obviously, things can be subject to change, but when working with another business, it's always best to try to stay as consistent as long as possible, because when you're a business, when things just suddenly change up on you, it's not great to like have to adjust to that constant. Getting your wholesale prices in order would be great. For paper goods, rule of thumb is about 50% of your retail price, otherwise known as MSRP. If you don't know where to start, about 50% is kind of the sweet spot. There's room to adjust from there. The other big thing to get started is definitely making SKU numbers for all of your products. This is going to help organize your end and tracking what is going out, what is selling well, and this also helps the retailer themselves keep organized because they're also inputting this information on their end.
And you mentioned that typically, at least for paper goods, it's usually 50% off as
Roughly.
the rough estimate for like the pricing. Is there any situation that it would be less than 50%, or if you can possibly do a little bit more than 50%?
That number will ultimately come down to what your production costs are and what you are comfortable with selling them at. You're selling bulk numbers of products at a steep discount. 50% is essentially a lot. Now, there can be some wiggle room depending on how much your things cost to make. Since I'm not familiar with it, I'm thinking about people who sell ceramic goods at wholesale. Like, those are handmade goods. 50% is kind of nuts, You figure out what is a comfortable number with you. Obviously, it's best if you can get other people's opinions on that. I belong to a community of other wholesalers. We can kind of audit each other and keep the market in a competitive rate so that no one's underselling and overcharging. My very first really large-scale wholesale order, it was just like a buyer that happened to be walking around one of my craft fair events, and they were like, hey, here's my card. If you do wholesale, can you please reach out? And I was like, yeah, of course. I emailed them. I was like, hi, this is my catalog. My MOQ per design is about 10 units. And this is how much it costs. And then they emailed me like a day or two later saying, yeah, actually we were thinking about like 1,000 per design. And I was
oh my god.
I actually almost threw up.
What, 1,000?
It shook me to my core. I was like, what do you mean 1,000 per design? That's not real.
That's like funny money at that point. Oh my god.
It was very funny money. And again, like those net 30 terms took place 30 days after that whole ordeal happened. I like was wearing like the nastiest sweats ever. My hair was greasy. And I like walk into the bank with this fat check and I'm like, hi, I'm here. I'm here to cash this in. I remember the face of the teller that helped me and they were like,
that's amazing.
Yeah,
well, congrats on that. Oh my gosh.
Thank you. I mean, when they say like anything for that bag, it does happen. Like your eyes just like glaze over. You're just like, what?
I've heard about this, but like what's a wholesale agreement and what are the basic terms and conditions you should include in one?
For a wholesale agreement, it's really your terms and conditions of the transaction, right? I think it's important to outline what kind of retailer you're okay to selling with. For example, I like to outline that I like to work with brick and mortars, and brick and mortars that have online shop. But I am not okay if they plan to resell my products on third-party platforms like Amazon, eBay, or Etsy. So that's what I outline in terms of what kind of retailer I'm looking for. Afterwards, you want to outline your minimum order value, which is like their opening order value is $100. They need to buy $100 worth of product in order to complete their purchase. However, I do also offer a reorder minimum of $80. So very first order with me, $100 minimum. At anything afterwards, $80 and we're good to go because we're establishing that business relationship there. After that, you want to outline your payment terms. Again, that net 30 and 60 terms are very common, but you don't have to do that because like in this day and age, it is not easy to wait 30 days to get your paycheck. On my direct order slips, I write that I need to take payment up front. However, with established clients, I am open to doing 30 to 60 days. But again, I like to advertise my Faire site. It handles all of that for me. And lastly, establishing your returns and exchange policy. So when you're working with those bigger quantities, you need to really be clear on what you are okay with as a business. I don't accept returns after, I believe, like 10 days after delivery. So they have those 10 days to decide if that product is right for them. After that, like exchanges may be okay on a case-by-case basis. Maybe, for example, something came like damaged or a handful of stickers had dust stuck under them, we can exchange that. Obviously, I don't want them to be selling B-grade items, so happy to exchange. And yeah, you just need to make it absolutely clear what your terms and conditions are.
For someone who is thinking about this, would you recommend that they start with a few products first or offer their entire catalog of products?
So the TLDR is your entire catalog, but at the end of the day, you are a business and you should choose what you feel comfortable being potentially on a retail shelf. So the reason why I suggest your entire catalog or as much as possible is because when you set up your order minimum of $100, your retailer needs to figure out how to reach that minimum. Now, especially if they're a first-time purchase, they're not just gonna like go in on just one product. They want like an assortment of things to meet that $100 requirement, but also they're trying to basically test out your products and see what does well for their own store. Sure, you might have a specific niche and like have a very like cohesive collection, but to a retailer, they might not see it all as being applicable to their business. So you want to give them as many options as possible so that they can really curate the right collection for their own customers. That's why I advise having as much as possible, because if they're only choosing from like 3 sticker designs, that's not a lot of choice. So.
And you did bring this up a little bit, but what minimum order quantities do you require for wholesale orders? Is it just 10 across the board, or is it depending on the type of product?
It depends on the product and kind of roughly like what the wholesale price is. For example, my stickers, I have a minimum order of 10 per SKU, and then my mini prints are also 10 per SKU. Larger items, like bigger ticket items, kind of range anywhere from like 3 to 6 for quantities. There is like an industry standard that is like still kind of elusive to me. If you didn't notice, you can't actually see other Faire shops as a Faire brand. So you can't see what your competitors are pricing their things at. You kind of can. There's like little hacks here and there, but it's not easy to access. Quantity wise, I would say what makes sense to you to ensure that the person is not buying it for personal use.
And how do you handle shipping and fulfilling these wholesale orders? Like, is there a way that you pack them differently compared to if someone purchases it from like your online shop?
Honestly, it's not much different. The main difference for me between a normal customer buying my things and a retailer buying my things is that I label all of my products going out to my retailer, because when the retailer receives their order, which may range from like 10 different types of items or even like 50, whoever is receiving the product is going to make sure they receive the right product and the right quantities per product, because mistakes happen, right? You might accidentally give 8 stickers and not 10. But you also can't assume the person receiving the inventory knows what they're looking at. That's why the SKU numbers are really important. I'm sure it's going to be a pain in the butt to be like, this product is Arson Cat waterproof vinyl sticker. It's much simpler to just be like VSTI0001, and then they can check mark it. Everything has its own SKU label for the most part.
I guess, for example, I would say that, or I would assume that for anyone who's new into it, let's assume they go with something like stickers. How do you decide how you package your stickers for wholesale? Like, I've seen various ways of like, oh, it's just the sticker, or sometimes they put like the little hook tab on it, or they have like a packaging for it. Like, how do you package your stickers for wholesale?
They are loosey-goosey. I just am not in the space to be able to offer different packaging options for my retailers. So I'm actually going to let them choose on their end to figure out how they want to display them in the end. Because not every retailer does it the same way. Some people have it just kind of in a rack, just like people might do at events. Some people do put the little hang tags on so they can prop them up. Some people who are the brands themselves like to package them in a backer carton sleeve. I just don't have time for that.
That's fair.
I don't have time for that. Sometimes if you are concerned about that, just open up a conversation with your retailer and say, hey, do you have a preference in how you would like your X product packaged? I have these packaging options available if you'd like. Now, you can introduce it as an additional cost. For example, I have postcards as one of my product SKUs, and they come loose, but I noticed that some of my retailers would stuff them into plastic sleeves before putting it on display. So I started asking, hey, do you want them sleeved? I can provide it to you for an additional 5 or 10 cents per product, so let me know.
I think I've only done 2 wholesale orders at one point, but for one of them, I really just made the stickers loose because at that point I was like, well, I don't really have any specific packaging for wholesale. I know I try to, as hard as it is, I try to minimize my waste even though it's plastic everywhere. So I'm like, I'll just leave the stickers loose, and like, I don't think they had a problem. But I've also seen other sticker wholesalers have them in individual packaging that I was wondering, at least from your experience, like which ones seem to be more common. But it also makes me feel better that you're okay with just loose stickers.
I also am very wary of my waste production. Although I find branding extremely important, at the end of the day, those things are going in the trash, and I do my best to make the product itself branded in some sort of way that it can stand alone. All of my products have my name on it. The question of who was this made by will never be a question. My name is already on there.
Yeah, that's the biggest advice I try to tell everyone is just somewhere on your sticker, your product, just something, make sure your business name is on it. Because the number of times that people have given me stickers, and then they briefly tell me their shop name, but my head is just so much overthinking and I'm busy.
48 hours pass.
I don't remember. And it's like, why is it not on the sticker?
Just to add on that, I know some people like to stamp their name or business on the back of the sticker, for example, but the back of the sticker is also going into trash.
Yeah, I thought that was smart too, but it's once it's actually used, now what if in the future you wanted to buy more stickers? But now you don't know where you bought that from because it's not on the name or it's not on the sticker.
I have been thanked online for putting my name on stickers because people will say, I've had this for years and I wanted to buy more, and thank God your name was on it because I would have been able to find you otherwise.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm in the mindset right now, being a small business owner, being in the artist alley scene, naturally I'm going to recognize people's artist names because I see them all the time. I see them very frequently. But for a lot of people, the average person who maybe goes to a couple events a year, if they go to any, they're not going to remember your name. They're just going to think I bought this at Anime Expo. I bought this at 626. They're not going to think, oh, I bought this from Goyangii, or I bought it from Mualcaina. So you kind of have to consider that aspect of people are not going to remember you unless your name is directly on the product. So we've briefly discussed how you work, or you also vend at events. And again, there's many types of events. In my case, I try to vend at anime conventions since that is pretty much my bread and butter. What type of events have you noticed that work best for you?
My bread and butter are definitely craft fairs. They're not necessarily always like the highest revenue, but in terms of venue and like table setup and the pace of interaction with customers, that's my sweet spot because it just has that really casual and relaxing atmosphere to kind of create that customer bond. But on top of that, I also do anime conventions and other maybe niche conventions like cat conventions. I've done designer con, small pop-ups here and there.
And when did you first start vending at events?
I would say the tail end of 2019. I did my very first event at a small gallery space in New York where I was living at the time. And then like quite literally a couple days after that, I did a more like medium scale craft fair show in Rhode Island with my school as an alumni.
And since starting, how many events have you done, if you remember?
I've done a total of 88 events since the end of 2019.
Very close to 100.
You know what? I didn't realize I was so close. I should really go all out on my 100th event.
You should. Oh my gosh, that would be very exciting. As of last year, how many events did you do?
Last year alone, I did 25.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's a lot in a year. Oh my gosh.
I mean, it is my main source of income, so I do try to do about 2 per month minimum.
Okay, minimum. Out of all of the events, this could count, I guess, like throughout all of the 88. Which one would you say was your most successful?
Revenue-wise, Fanime was my very most high profiting event. And the funny thing is, I have only done one Fanime in my like 5 years of business, and it was the first show after shelter in place kind of went away. It was my first and only 4-day show as well. So that was definitely why I could hit those revenue numbers. Haven't seen those numbers quite since, but that was definitely a high.
I feel like that was probably one of the better Fanimes too, just because, again, it was like straight after quarantine started to, like slow down. So then people are just itching to go to anime cons. And then, you know, with the demographic too of being in a tech city, they want to spend their money.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't think of it that way. Yeah, it was definitely probably like needed to get their fix after so long.
And from your experience, what supposedly like successful event actually did not do well for you, and if you have one, like why do you think it didn't go that well?
I wouldn't call events particularly like unsuccessful for me. Even when like I don't really hit great revenue numbers, shows with like some level of reputation or prestige usually have its own benefits. I will say, however, I don't find much success with night markets, particularly for my business. I would say it's probably because my kind of shopping experience is probably not as casual as most other night market booths are. I would say I curate a but like it's a bit more intimate. I like to chat with my customers. Customers usually like to chat with me. You know, they want to ask me like, hey, why is this cat holding a Molotov? And, you know, we strike up a conversation from there. That doesn't really happen so much at night markets. It might be because I don't have the layout quite down. My lighting might not be the best. I love being in the sun when I'm doing an outdoor event. It like really gives the proper spotlight to my products. Lighting is kind of not my favorite thing to work with for night markets. And on top of that, from a personal standpoint, the hours and like physical labor involved with doing night markets is just kind of really exhausting, and I wonder if that like kind of shows up in the later hours of the event, and I'm just like on fumes, and you know, that's probably not the most attractive to like enter to as a customer.
Yeah, it's like you look like you just want to leave, but you're working.
I'm actually gonna leave her alone. She looks
Yeah.
tired. I'm gonna keep walking.
Yeah, I feel that way about night markets. Like, I know for a lot of people, night markets, like, with Chloris, like, night markets are her bread and butter. And it's like for myself, and like, at least in your case as well, it's like, night markets they're okay. I've seen your display in person, and you have brought this up, and I've noticed that you go with a self-serve model where customers can just grab what they want and then they can pay. Have you always had a self-serve display since you first started?
Yes, there are a lot of benefits to having a self-serve display. One, I think the most talked about is like giving that very intimate personal experience for the customer to enjoy the product. That tangible experience can create that bond in their mind. For me, an added bonus is that I invest a lot into the quality of my products, and for them to be able to hold it and really feel the tactileness of it, it sells itself without me having to do anything. Lastly, like, I am a solo vendor. I want to do the least amount of physical work as possible. I can't imagine trying to fish out everything from the back of the booth in like a tiny little space. I can't.
And you have a lot of products too, so I can imagine like that would be very painful to do it if it was like the menu style.
Especially they're all small things, so it's just like I will have to just like dig.
And would you recommend having a self-serve display for like most vendors?
Having a self-serve display is really great for the customer and feeling like you're actually in a little store where you can just shop as you please. But if you as the seller, if the anxiety of someone potentially damaging your product or even stealing your product is gonna stress you out, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's at the end of the day, it's up to you and what you're comfortable with. There are benefits, right, to self-serve, but if it's gonna eat you up, don't do it.
Right now I have a menu style, right? But I'm getting to a point where I'm considering doing half self-serve and half like menu style. I mean, it makes sense to have menu style for Eat bags. I'm like, I don't want to.
You can't have them all out there.
No.
People like fiddling with them.
But then at least with self-serve, I might consider that for like the smaller items like stickers, maybe like some prints when they come out. Self-serve seems to suit well for most people. I think I'm just very paranoid as well. But I'm getting over it, which is why I want to do self-serve.
I guess, like, for me personally, when it comes to the anxiety of theft, most people don't steal, which is pretty nice. And if they do steal, it's usually just a one of something, a couple of somethings, right? As long as they don't take the whole freaking stack of like one type of sticker, take it. It's fine. You know what? Maybe one day you'll come back and feel like you want to spend money with me, which would be great. Actually, I had someone steal something from a retailer of my stickers, and months later, they PayPal'd me $4 saying like,
I remember
I looked you up on social media and I felt bad, so here's $4.
Oh my god. It's like, give it straight to the artist, not even the retailer, I guess.
But the retailer already bought it from me.
Yeah. I know in the beginning I used to be very paranoid about it, but then like you said, I think if someone were to steal something, they're not stealing a whole stack of like
I hope
one
not.
design. So it's like, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you use to display your products for events?
I use card rack displays, acrylic nail polish holders for stickers. I use dish racks, little trays, your usual bump in displays that you might see at a convention hall.
Yeah, I've seen dish racks being used quite often for like the smaller prints, and I thought that was really smart because I didn't even think they were for dishes.
Yeah, my first event, 80% of my displays I sourced from the thrift store because I just looked at things and I try to think, can this be a vessel for my product? And it works. You can get creative on a budget, and once you kind of figure out what works or not, you can invest in more like proper displays. But I still use some of my thrift store purchases.
There's so many good things that you can get from a thrift store, because even for displays, in my head, I would think that if I'm going to get something for display, like you said, it's just a vessel for your product. Hopefully your product is good enough that it will overshadow whatever you used as to hold your products, but most people won't even notice it. At events, and particularly Artist Alley, I feel like being a print artist can be competitive since the barrier to entry is a bit lower compared to if you sold apparel or keychains. What are some of the ways you work to stand out as a print artist at events, especially with a lot of cat designs, which tends to be pretty popular, at least from my perspective, like amongst other artists in Artist Alley?
I would say if you're unfamiliar with my work and you are touring a convention hall, right? First thing you actually notice from my booth is not the cat art, it's actually the abundant amount of color. So I affectionately like to call it rainbow vomit, and I like to disperse the color like throughout my booth. If you are a person who enjoys bright colors, your eyes are immediately attracted to it, kind of like, oh, what is mosaic of bright colors? Let me take a few extra seconds to kind of inspect this. And then they will see my like larger art prints on display, which will feature my slightly violent cat, and they'll be like, oh, there's cats. And then they'll walk over and they'll see it's cute. They're all so upset and kind of violent. It's like a 3-step process. Like, we got all the bright colors to get your initial grab of interest, and then the second part is like, oh, there's like cute little cat shape, and then they're like, oh wait, they're really spicy. So that's how I maintain my kind of like presence in a hall of other print and cat artists.
I didn't even think about that with using color, because in my head, when I see your art, I'm like, oh yeah, I like how it's like really cute, and then when you read like whatever you put on the prints or the stickers, I'm like, oh my god, they're so angry, but I love it. I love that like combination of like cuteness and then the pastel or like the really nice colors, and then they're angry, and I'm like, I love this. This is my favorite.
Thank you. You know, I love a good twist.
I think my first purchase of yours was like the cat yelling like fuck, and I'm like, this is my favorite.
Wait, we can swear on your podcast?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, thank God. Thank God.
No, it's okay.
I was holding back.
Oh, no. And as an artist, how do you decide if an event is worth vending at again if the revenue wasn't like amazing?
I think an event can be up for consideration of being done again if my thought is it's better than if I was just like sitting at home doing nothing, right? So that's like the bare minimum qualifications that I feel like it was worth me at least coming out. However, you know, our time is precious and time is money. I will judge it off of how much I enjoy it as a vendor. Like, will it allow me to interact with other fellow vendors that I want to network with? Does it allow like space for me to be able to talk to my customers? I really enjoy the one-on-one interactions I get with my customers, because who doesn't love being told, oh my god, I love your art. Yeah. I live for that shit. Yeah. If it's like, you know, a chill event, maybe it's not high grossing numbers, I get that external validation, we're good. But there's also events that I do to this day that aren't like really great numbers, but they have a degree of prestige. I'm actually just gonna call them out right now. Okay. So here in San Francisco, there are 2 major craft organizers called West Coast Craft and Renegade Craft. They hold their events at Fort Mason in San Francisco. So I like to rate my money as okay, good, and great. So usually they kind of sit in between the good and great, which, you know, I love that. But their booths are very expensive, right? To just hit between good and great. But I still like going. I like the vibe of the event, but due to the prestige of their name, it brings like all sorts of people there. And a lot of the times I've gotten wholesale buyers from these shows. That's how I got that really ginormous wholesale order, because this person just happened to be walking around for funsies. I will never question like a slow event, because sometimes really amazing things can happen regardless.
Is there anything you would do differently if you could start vending in person over again?
When I first started out, I wish I charged sales tax.
Oh my god!
I didn't start charging till 2023.
Sarah.
Now, I want you to understand where I'm coming from.
Okay. I need to hear this.
You know, with card transactions and cash, most people charge sales tax on card and then don't with cash. Now, I didn't like the idea of card being a different price than cash because I just didn't want to deal with the conversation of that. So I just made everything sales tax included. But I didn't quite adjust for that amount. I was eating several thousand in sales taxes for a few years on behalf of the people because I just didn't want an awkward conversation. But now I actually do it a little bit differently than most vendors, I would say. So I do charge sales tax on card purchases, but I actually still charge sales tax on cash. Now, I really did not want to deal with coins, so what I've been doing is like, hey, your purchase is this amount with sales tax included. For cash, I round down to the nearest whole dollar, so that is your total if you would like to go with cash. That is my solution.
See, I want to go in that direction. I think I have a similar thought in my head where I don't want to go with that conversation, but with cash, which technically I should be charging that additional sales tax with cash. I just feel weird where it's like, oh, why does it say for your pins it's 3 for $40, but then, you know, like, I guess that's the same thing with card. So maybe I have to go in that direction
but
too.
It's also the same thing in any retail store you like walk into, right? So even if you're paying cash, you're still paying sales tax. Now, I didn't want to hold like 5,000 pennies, so my solution is to round it down to the nearest whole dollar. Kind of evens out with like not having to pay the card transaction fee ourselves versus like losing a couple on a cash transaction.
I see. I might have to do that. I cannot believe you waited till 2023. That's so funny. Okay, so now we are moving on to our speed round / miscellaneous questions. What's a common myth surrounding vending in person?
That you need to have a following to find success. You don't. I started as a nobody and I was still able to get into those like higher named events. My very first like legit event, I made rent and then some in one day. You don't have to have a social media following.
Yeah, I've noticed that particularly with like, let's say Anime Expo. I remember, I think was it last year they had juried for new artists. There were so many really big name artists that did not get in through Artist Alley. And even with, like you said, like with the revenue aspect, you don't need to have a following to make money at cons. If anything, sure, it can help you bring traffic in. But more often than not, like people going into these cons, again, if they're like normies or if they don't really follow like vendors or whatnot, they're just there to see what they like, and if they like your stuff, they will buy it, regardless if you have a following. So it's like, if anyone's worried about their following, don't worry about it. What's a dream event you'd like to vend at?
Every year, I like to do something a little different with like the type of events I apply to. 2021 and 2022, I really tried to get into anime conventions. 2023, I did night markets and I added on cat-specific events. And then 2024, I did more craft-centric events. And this year, I really wanted to get into furry cons. Yes. I have been rejected or waitlisted to every single one so far, so it might just have to remain as a dream for now.
Is there a specific furry con that you want, or just any?
At this point, anyone that will take me. I just want to know what it's like.
Yeah, they seem fun. Like, it's so interesting.
And if anyone knows anything about me, I do really feel enchanted by the idea of being inside of a cat.
Oh yeah! I think this is your call. You need to try it. Yes, I am rooting for you, Sarah.
I don't identify as a furry, but the idea of being in a little like suit.
Yeah. It's like when I get one. Like my dream right now, my goal within the next couple years is to make my own mascot. I need to decide like which of the 4 characters. But I will reach out to you.
Inside of it?
Yes. You'll be the first person I go to. It's like, who's in that? Probably Sarah.
I will do it for free.
Yes. When it comes to wholesale, what do you invest in and what are you cheap about?
Definitely the quality of my product. I mean, I've always done that for my own like self to customer side of things, but especially when I have another business on the line, I really want to make sure the product is high quality, high standards, and I also like to spend the time to make sure that the product will do fairly well in most stores. So sometimes I won't even release a new product on my wholesale catalog till like months down the road just so I can see if it does well, and then I will put it up for sale. But that's after I've like made sure like it will have a fighting chance. I am cheap about throwables, things that are gonna end up in the garbage. So I will literally reuse shipping boxes that I receive from like my own purchases. They are ratty boxes, and I put labels on the boxes that say, sorry for my appearance, I am a recycled box. Because they get it, they receive so many boxes and that thing is going in the recycling bin. I don't do branded tape. I would love to eventually, but at the moment it's just not a priority. I don't really do like backing cards for everything. You make choices where it feels right where you are at the moment. So
I do the boxes thing all the time. To be honest, even with like direct to customer, I don't know if you've seen like the little heart purse, like the small one. That one's small, and I don't like, I think similarly, I don't want to buy packaging for boxes of like various sizes because they're expensive. So I just have like a standard like 14 by 14 by 5. And I'm like, I don't want to put the small heart bag in there. So if I ordered something online and then the box like fits it perfectly, I'm like, I'm gonna frickin' use that. It's like, why would I? It's so perfect. It's like if I peel off the label and everything, it's like good as new. I'm like, I'm gonna use that.
Exactly. Behind every small business is a horde of cardboard boxes. Used cardboard boxes.
What's your controversial vendor opinion, if you have one?
My controversial opinion, particularly towards like artist alleys, I think artists should try to prioritize their own visibility behind their booth more. While I get it, some of y'all have way too much product and you are trying to cram it in on your 6-foot table, but like having that little like prison window of like cash your card, or like, you know, let me bag that for you, which, you know, from like my perspective is kind of really freaking hilarious. But me, as someone who has been doing this for a few years now, like if your goal is to kind of grow your art into like a full-scale business, that customer and artist interaction is quite valuable, and has like long-term rewards down the road. And if you're hiding behind your booth because you're shy, I get it, but like small interaction of like someone being able to comfortably tell you like, hey, I really love your art, are you gonna be here next year, like how long have you been doing this, it's great. But if you have like a lot of product in front of you, that conversation is usually cut very short, or like it's never initiated because it feels a little awkward, right?
Exactly. And you're basically representing your business, and that interaction will sometimes determine if someone even wants to buy from you. But also, I love that you called it like a prison window. It's like, I just see like a little slot.
Here's your little meal. It's actually your bag of stickers.
What has been your biggest money mistake with your business and why?
I mean, aside from the sales tax issue, my biggest money mistake, again, particularly in the beginning, was not having a well-informed CPA from the start. Much kudos to people who know how to file their taxes on their own. My brain does not work like that. Yeah. So when I had to file my first time self-employed taxes, my mom basically hooked me up with, I know a guy who knows a guy. And then they filed for me. It was so wrong, and I didn't know it was wrong till like I worked with someone who was more knowledgeable with small business. They filed my taxes for the next year, and then they reviewed my previous year's taxes, and they're like, hey, if you get audited, you're gonna owe like a lot of fucking money, so would you like to correct it right now? And I was like, yes, please. And then I still owed a lot of like thousands of dollars in back pay, but you know, I wasn't expecting that charge. Make sure you have knowledgeable people who are working with your hard-earned dollars. So again, if you're gonna look for a CPA, a good indicator for a good CPA is someone that doesn't make you feel stupid when you're asking questions or when they're speaking. I do not know a lot of tax terminology to this day, and I don't feel nervous about just stopping them when they're reviewing my taxes and be like, can you explain this? And they always explain it like I'm 5 years old. It's great. I tell them, yeah, explain it as childishly as possible so I can get it.
That's a good indication because I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I'm asking someone who I hired and am paying, and then they're making me feel stupid when it's like, okay, why am I supposed to, like, obviously, like, we should have some basic knowledge of taxes. But if I'm paying someone to do something, like, you need to not make me feel stupid because that's why I'm hiring you, is because you know this. And I also want to know what's going on with my business and, like, taxes, so you shouldn't make me feel stupid. When did you first feel successful with your business, and what does that word mean to you?
My first feeling of success was when I finally made the jump to go full-time with my business. It wasn't actually because I was making, like, incredible revenue. I was just making enough to cover most of my bills and expenses, but at the time I made the jump because my freelance job I was working at the time abruptly fired me, so I kind of like had to decide, should I go full time with Goyangii or do I keep job hunting in this hellhole of a job market? I decided, you know what, if I'm gonna be unemployable, I'm just gonna employ myself. And shortly after, I like put out a TikTok of my now infamous arson cat. It went like baby viral. We're talking about like maybe 30,000 views. That gave me the confidence to be like, you know what, I think I can make some desirable things. I'm just gonna go all in. That was my kind of moment of success.
Are you working on any big projects or new products that you'd like to share?
My biggest project at the moment is branding my own web store. I have been on Etsy from the beginning. There is no shame in that. You don't need to jump into your own store if you're not ready for it, but you know, after 5 years, I feel ready for it. So that is coming down the woodwork soon. I won't say soon, sometime this year.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I learned so much, especially as someone who wants to go into wholesale. And I love talking about vending, so thank you for that. Where can our audience find you?
Yeah, you can find me at goyangii.com, GOYANGII.com. On socials, I will be _Goyangii on Instagram, _Goyangii on TikTok. You can just find me doing NPC things around the Bay Area if you're local.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us. Again, amazing conversation. And thank you to everyone listening in. I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.